Ibrahim Traoré knew the ghosts of the past did not sleep. They lived in the silence of the presidential archives, trapped in brittle paper and faded ink. Tonight, the leader of Burkina Faso was hunting those ghosts. While Ouagadougou slept, Captain Traoré was on a personal mission, sifting through colonial-era documents. His people saw him as a liberator, Captain Africa, but in this silent room, he was just a guardian, seeking to right the wrongs done to his nation long before he was born. Then he found it. A heavy ledger bound in blue leather, marked only with an embossed phoenix. Projet Phoenix, 1954. What Ibrahim Traoré discovered inside made his blood run cold. It detailed a French-run nutritional enhancement program, providing vitamin supplements to pregnant women in dozens of remote villages. But these weren't health reports. They were laboratory logs, tracking not wellness but weakness. They noted birth weights, immune deficiencies, and genetic markers across 2 generations. It was a cold, calculated experiment. As Captain Traoré turned a fragile page, a folded map fell out. It showed Burkina Faso, with the exact villages from the medical records circled in red ink. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. Ibrahim Traoré recognized those villages instantly. They were the very same ones his health minister had praised him for securing aid for just last week. He recalled the minister's jubilant voice. A triumph, President Traoré. The Global Humanitarian Initiative has chosen us for its African Hope program. They are providing their new Vita Plus supplements free of charge. Ibrahim Traoré's eyes darted from the 70-year-old map to a modern-day GHI proposal on his desk. He traced the list of targeted villages. They were identical, a perfect, horrifying match. This was no coincidence. His hands shaking with a cold rage, Traoré turned to the final page of the 1954 ledger. There, in the elegant script of the French project director, Dr. Alain Dubois, was a final entry. Conclusion: the supplements have performed beyond expectation. The targeted genetic markers show a cumulative degradation. Immune deficiencies are prevalent in the 2nd generation. Projections indicate a systemic weakening, a population rendered perpetually dependent. They will be easier to manage. Project Phoenix is a resounding success. The horror of the words hit Ibrahim Traoré like a physical blow. A silent, genetic cage built over decades. A weapon designed to create a nation that could never truly be free. The very people Captain Traoré had sworn his life to protect were being systematically poisoned. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was his health minister. "Captain, fantastic news. The first GHI cargo plane has just landed. The CEO, a Mr. Gerard Dubois, is on board. He says he is the grandson of a doctor who did charity work here in the 1950s. A beautiful legacy." Ibrahim Traoré looked at the name in the old ledger. Dr. Alain Dubois. He looked at the name on his phone. CEO Gerard Dubois. Grandfather and grandson. The legacy wasn't compassion. It was a crime, 70 years in the making. And the final phase was in a cargo plane, just kilometers away. The poison was at the gates, and only Ibrahim Traoré stood in its way. The roar of the cargo jet's engines echoed across the tarmac. A gleaming white plane with the blue dove of the Global Humanitarian Initiative painted on its tail stood under the unforgiving sun. CEO Gerard Dubois descended the stairs, a predator disguised in a $1,000 suit, his smile wide and artificial. He saw Captain Ibrahim Traoré waiting for him, flanked by his ministers. To Dubois, Traoré was just another obstacle, a temporary leader in a nation his family had been manipulating for 3 generations. "Mr. President," Dubois boomed, extending a hand, "a historic day. It is an honor to continue my grandfather's noble work and bring the gift of health to the wonderful people of Burkina Faso." Ibrahim Traoré took the man's hand, his grip firm, his eyes like chips of obsidian. "Indeed, Mr. Dubois, a historic day," Traoré replied, his voice dangerously smooth. "A legacy is a powerful thing. We are so honored, in fact, that we have assembled the international press at the palace. The world must see this great act of charity. They must see the face of the man who is saving our children." Dubois' smile widened. A press conference. Perfect. Free publicity for his charity. A perfect cover for the final phase of Project Phoenix. He had underestimated this young captain. The man knew how to play the game, or so he thought. An hour later, in the grand hall of the presidential palace, the cameras flashed. Gerard Dubois stood at a podium, delivering a masterful speech about corporate responsibility and humanitarian duty. He spoke of his grandfather, Dr. Alain Dubois, as a selfless pioneer. He planted a seed of hope here, Dubois declared. Today, with our new Vita Plus supplements, we are here to tend that garden. Then, it was Ibrahim Traoré's turn. He walked to the podium, not with a speech, but with the old blue leather ledger in his hands. He placed it on the lectern with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. Mr. Dubois speaks of his grandfather's legacy, Captain Traoré began, his voice resonating with quiet power. I have read about this legacy. I found it in our national archives. A project called Phoenix. A flicker of confusion, then alarm crossed Dubois' face. Ibrahim Traoré does not forget his nation's history, the captain continued, opening the ledger. This book details a nutritional enhancement program from 1954. It speaks of a resounding success. It details how the immune systems of an entire generation were degraded. It calls the result permanent ashes. This is the seed your grandfather planted, Mr. Dubois. Not hope, poison. Gasps filled the hall. Dubois turned pale, sputtering, "This is an outrage, an absurd fabrication from some dusty, irrelevant colonial document. Our work today is transparent, scientific, and benevolent." "I agree," Ibrahim Traoré said, a cold smile touching his lips. "Science is the key." He gestured to the side of the stage. A woman in a white lab coat walked forward, Dr. Fatoumata Salafou, Burkina Faso's top biochemist. "When your plane landed, Mr. Dubois," Traoré announced, "my soldiers didn't just unload it. They took samples. Dr. Salafou and her team have been analyzing your gift of health for the last 3 hours. Dr. Salafou placed a file on the podium. "Mr. President," she said, her voice clear and strong, "the Vita Plus supplements contain a sophisticated synthetic protein marker. It's designed to inhibit the absorption of key nutrients and to trigger autoimmune deficiencies over time. It is without question a form of biological weapon." She paused, then delivered the final devastating blow. "The marker's genetic signature is identical to residual compounds we found in soil samples from the villages targeted in the 1954 Phoenix Project." The room erupted. Gerard Dubois stared, his mask of civility completely gone, his face a canvas of pure terror. Ibrahim Traoré leaned into the microphone, his voice a low growl that carried to every corner of the globe. "The legacy is real. The science is clear. And the crime is ongoing." He pointed a single steady finger at the CEO. "Gerard Dubois, you are not a humanitarian. You are the heir to a 70-year-old crime against my people. And here in Burkina Faso, your family's legacy ends. Arrest him." As soldiers swarmed the stage, the world's cameras flashed, capturing not the image of a benevolent CEO, but the face of a monster, exposed by the very leader he had come to destroy. The arrest of Gerard Dubois live on television was not an end. It was the firing of the starting pistol. The world was in shock. The Global Humanitarian Initiative's parent company, a massive French pharmaceutical conglomerate named Laboratoires Unis, immediately went into damage control. Their statement was swift and furious. "This is a barbaric act of political theater. President Ibrahim Traoré has kidnapped a respected philanthropist, based on forged documents and pseudoscience. We demand the immediate release of Mr. Dubois and an apology from the government of Burkina Faso." They expected Ibrahim Traoré to be isolated, to be condemned by the international community for his reckless actions. They underestimated him. They underestimated the fury of a continent that had heard whispers of such stories for generations, but had never before seen the proof laid bare for the world to witness. In the presidential palace, Captain Traoré was not celebrating. He was in his command center, a room now dedicated to a new kind of war. "They will cut us off," he told his cabinet. "They control the shipping lanes for medical supplies. They will try to create a real health crisis to discredit our findings." The threat became reality faster than he could have imagined. Within 12 hours, the World Health Organization, under immense pressure from its European donors, issued a statement expressing deep concern over the politicization of health aid and announcing a temporary suspension of all non-essential medical shipments to Burkina Faso pending a full investigation. It was a death sentence delivered with a polite smile. But Ibrahim Traoré had been preparing for this moment since the day he took office. He knew that true sovereignty wasn't just about controlling borders, it was about controlling supply chains. He made a single phone call. The recipient was Dr. Nkechi Adebayo in Lagos, Nigeria, the brilliant and fiery head of the newly formed Pan-African Pharmaceutical Alliance, PAPA. Nkechi, Ibrahim Traoré said, his voice calm amidst the growing storm. They have made their move. It's time. We are ready, Captain, Dr. Adebayo's voice replied, crackling with energy. The beast has been poked. Now it will see that we have teeth of our own. What Laboratoire Unis and the WHO didn't know was that for the past year, Ibrahim Traoré had been secretly funneling funds into PAPA, a coalition of Nigerian, Ghanaian, Kenyan, and South African scientists and manufacturers. Their mission, to reverse engineer and produce essential generic medicines, breaking Africa's dependency on the West. As the Western medical embargo began, a fleet of Nigerian cargo planes took off from Lagos. They weren't carrying soldiers, they were carrying millions of doses of antibiotics, antimalarials, and basic hospital supplies, all produced in Africa, for Africa. The Lazarus airlift, as it would come to be known, was underway. Back in Ouagadougou, Gerard Dubois sat in a secure interrogation room, his arrogance replaced by a sullen defiance. He believed his corporation's power would protect him. He believed he would be home in a week. He did not yet understand the man he was dealing with. Ibrahim Traoré entered the room alone. He placed a single photograph on the table in front of Dubois. It was a black and white picture of a young woman, smiling, holding a newborn baby. "Do you know who this is?" Traoré asked. Dubois shrugged. "Some village woman." "Her name was Anaya," Ibrahim Traoré said, his voice dangerously soft. "She was my grandmother. She lived in one of your grandfather's Phoenix villages. She received his vitamin supplements. My mother was born with a weak heart. My grandmother died before she was 40. This is not a political document to me, Mr. Dubois. This is the story of my family, my people." For the first time, a sliver of genuine fear entered Dubois' eyes. This wasn't about contracts or geopolitics anymore. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this was personal. "You are going to stand trial, Mr. Dubois," Traoré continued, "but not here, not yet." He leaned forward. "You are going to face a tribunal of the African Union. You will be tried under the Malabo Protocol for the crime of corporate neocolonialism. You will face judges from across this continent. Your company's assets in every signatory nation will be frozen. Your operations will be seized. Your secrets will be laid bare. Your family's legacy of poison ends now, and the healing of Africa begins." The announcement of an African Union tribunal for Gerard Dubois sent a cataclysmic shockwave through the global corporate world. It was an unprecedented move. For centuries, Western executives had operated in Africa with near-total impunity, protected by a system of international law that they themselves had written. Now, Ibrahim Traoré was tearing up that playbook and writing a new one. Laboratoires Unis unleashed the full might of its legal and political arsenal. They hired the world's most expensive law firms, who filed emergency petitions at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, decrying an illegal kidnapping and a show trial. The French president, live from Paris, called it a return to barbarism and threatened crippling economic sanctions against Burkina Faso and any nation that supported what he called Traoré's kangaroo court. But the tide was turning. Emboldened by Ibrahim Traoré's stand, other African leaders began to speak out. The president of Kenya produced records showing a suspiciously high rate of cancer in communities surrounding a Laboratoire Unis chemical plant. The Ghanaian finance minister revealed how the company had used predatory pricing to destroy local pharmaceutical competitors. The Lazarus airlift continued, a symbol of defiance, with more nations joining the Pan-African Pharmaceutical Alliance. The story was no longer just about Burkina Faso. It was about the systemic exploitation of a continent. Inside the palace, Ibrahim Traoré knew that legal and economic battles were only one front. The enemy was cornered and would become more desperate. He summoned his intelligence chief, Colonel Kabore. "They will try to extract him," Traoré stated. "A special forces raid. Mercenaries. It's their only move left." Kabore nodded grimly. "We've tripled security at the holding facility, sir, but it's not a fortress." "Then we won't keep him there," Ibrahim Traoré said, a strategic glint in his eye. "We will move him, but no one will know where, not even you, Colonel, not completely." That night, a heavily armed convoy left the capital, a decoy designed to draw attention. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, Ibrahim Traoré personally oversaw the transfer of Gerard Dubois. There was no motorcade, just a single nondescript vehicle. Their destination was not a prison, but a small, isolated clinic in a remote village. The very village where Traoré's grandmother, Anaya, had lived and died. When they arrived, Dubois, accustomed to luxury, was horrified. The clinic was clean but simple, powered by a single generator. His cell was a humble room with a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the red earth and the resilient faces of the villagers. An elderly woman brought him his food. She looked at him not with hatred, but with a deep, weary sadness. "My sister," she said to him in the local language, which an ever-present guard translated. "She took the vitamins from the French doctor many years ago. None of her babies lived past their first year." For the first time in his life, Gerard Dubois was not surrounded by lawyers and lobbyists. He was surrounded by the quiet, dignified faces of his victims. The statistics from his grandfather's ledger were no longer abstract data points. They were the living, breathing people outside his window. The permanent ashes had a human face. Days turned into a week. There was no rescue raid. The decoy convoy had been followed, but the real target had vanished. The world wondered where the CEO was being held. Laboratoire unis grew more frantic. It was then that Captain Traoré made his next move. He released a video to the world. It wasn't a political speech. It was simple footage, shot on a small camera. It showed Gerard Dubois sitting in his simple room. It showed the elderly woman bringing him a bowl of rice. It showed the village children, some with visible health issues, playing in the dust just outside his window. There was no commentary, no music, just the silent, damning reality. The caption on the video was simple: "Mr. Dubois is not in a prison. He is in his grandfather's laboratory, observing the results of his experiment." The video went viral, bypassing every media filter. It was more powerful than any legal argument or political threat. It transformed the narrative from a legal dispute into a moral reckoning. The image of the powerful CEO, trapped not by bars but by the human consequences of his family's greed, was devastating. The pressure on Laboratoire Unis and the French government became unbearable. The world was no longer just watching a leader. They were watching a monster confront his legacy. And the entire continent held its breath, waiting for the final act. The silent video was a masterstroke. It shattered the narrative that Ibrahim Traoré was a barbarian and recast him as a philosopher king, forcing his enemy to confront the human cost of his crimes. The global campaign by Laboratoire Unis faltered. Shareholders panicked. The French government, facing immense international and domestic pressure, began to quietly back away, issuing statements about the need for a full and transparent investigation. They were cutting Dubois loose. Trapped in the village clinic, Gerard Dubois felt the foundations of his world crumble. His wealth was useless. His political connections were severed. His name, once a symbol of corporate power, was now synonymous with evil. He was haunted by the faces of the villagers, by the quiet dignity of the old woman who brought him food, by the ghosts of the children his family's supplements had condemned. He was no longer a CEO. He was just a man, alone with a monstrous legacy. After 2 weeks, Ibrahim Traoré returned to the village. He entered Dubois' room. The man who sat before him was a shadow of the arrogant executive who had stepped off the plane. His eyes were hollow, his defiance gone. "Why?" Dubois asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Why bring me here?" "Because justice is not about revenge," Ibrahim Traoré said, his voice low and steady. "It is about understanding. I wanted you to see, not to read a report, not to listen to lawyers, but to see with your own eyes the truth of what your family did. This place, this clinic, is built on land that belongs to my family. This is where the ashes of Project Phoenix fell. Now you understand." "What happens now?" Dubois asked, defeated. "Now, justice takes its course," Traoré replied. "The African Union Tribunal will proceed, but you will not face it alone." The next day, the world watched as a Burkinabe military plane landed in Arusha, Tanzania, the seat of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Gerard Dubois, looking frail and diminished, walked down the steps in handcuffs. But he was not the only one. Following him were 3 former executives of Laboratoires Unis and 2 retired French intelligence officers, all of whom had been extradited by other African nations emboldened by Traoré's actions. The trial was a historic moment. For the first time, a major Western corporation and its state enablers were being tried by an African court for crimes committed on African soil. Dr. Salafu's scientific evidence was irrefutable. The Blue Ledger was presented, and in a stunning turn, Isabelle Dubois, appearing via a secure video link from hiding, gave her testimony, confirming the media conspiracy. But the most powerful testimony came from a surprise witness, Gerard Dubois himself. He stood before the court and delivered a full confession, detailing not only his role but the entire 70-year history of Project Phoenix. He spoke of his grandfather's callous ambition, of the corporate culture that valued profits over human life, and of the profound shame he felt living among the victims. The verdict was a foregone conclusion: guilty. The corporation was hit with a record-breaking reparations penalty, a fund to be administered by the Pan-African Pharmaceutical Alliance to build hospitals and research centers across the continent. Dubois and the others were sentenced to life in prison. Months later, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood on a platform in the very village where his grandmother was buried. He was not there for a military parade, but for the grand opening of the Anaya Phoenix Health and Research Institute, the first of many to be funded by the reparations. The state-of-the-art facility rose from the red earth, a testament to resilience and rebirth. The name was his own idea. From the ashes of the Phoenix Project, something new and life-giving would grow, named for one of its first victims. A young girl, the great-granddaughter of the old woman who had served Dubois his meals, handed him a pair of scissors. As he cut the ribbon, the crowd of villagers erupted in cheers. He looked at their faces, no longer etched with the weariness of inherited suffering, but shining with the bright light of a future they could finally call their own. Ibrahim Traoré knew the fight for Africa's soul was far from over. But today, a great battle had been won. He had not just brought a criminal to justice. He had shown his people and the world that the ghosts of the past could be defeated, and that from the deepest ashes, a nation, a continent, could truly rise.